Hello, YouTube. Melvin, Quad Geekery. And I wanted to look into some stuff from the election. And so I looked at the 2020 exit polls and wanted to see why it is that most of this discussion about being afraid for black men voting turning to Trump. And I don't I don't see why it was just this video trying to scare people with Project 2020, 2024, or 2025, whatever the fuck. And it doesn't make sense. Now, you'll notice this isn't here, but if you scroll all the way up to the top, you will find out that 12% of black people in their sample voted Republican. 87 voted Democrat, and 1% voted third party. What that means is, with a little creativity, we can find the NA, which is, in this case, so you've got that dividing line in 51%. So 51% of black people making $100,000 or more voted for President Biden in 2020. Okay? So that's 51%. What do you know? So this 0.12 total percentage voting for Trump. 0.9% of the total black population that in the sample that made less than 100,000. 0.08, 8% of the 90% that made less than 100,000 voted for Trump, which means 0.1% is the remaining 0.1 is the remaining 10%. The result, 48% of black people making over 100,000 in that sample voted for Trump. What that would suggest is some of the reason that black people vote for Trump is they did get an economic benefit, and they do get economic benefits from being Republicans, which would suggest that they derive economic benefits from when Republicans are in office. And if that is the case, then they have a material, possibly even purely pecuniary interest in Republican policies being enforced. You can come up with all the rhetoric you want. At the end of the day, if they're looking for the bag, they're getting the bag when Republicans are in office. Pretending like they're not, or pretending that they don't exist, does not change the material reality. The current status of battleground blotto game politics is that Democrats kind of either need to get, quote, moderate Dick Cheney style neoconservative Republicans to vote Democrat with something, or they need to have Kamala Harris get Barack Obama levels of support from black Republicans. Meaning she needs to get this group of black people to vote Democrat. Good luck. Because it turns out that the only group that doesn't have a big change are white voters overall. Because for Latino voters, you have the same underlying issue. So I find it interesting. Just pay attention to that. So they said 9,000 white people, 2,500 Latinos. Okay, there's no version where having 2,000 people means you can't have this filled out. So that doesn't make any sense at all. Why that data is not being represented. The sample size may be too small with confidence to their true values in the population. Okay, 30%, 21%. Okay, there's also another problem with the black sample. It is almost 70% women. So there's a very large sampling bias toward black women in the black sample. So we can feel confident that the 48% support among black people making over 100,000 will probably be different because black men were almost twice as likely to vote for Trump as black women, which would suggest that this number would look more like this, or this, or this. At no point does it look like what we had, which would suggest that black voters are not as monolithic as any of the discussions would sound. If you're trying to convince black people that are leaning toward Trump to vote for Kamala Harris, you would need to understand what those potential Trump voters would look like in the battleground states that you need to win. And if this is any indication, most of the coverage are for black men that are working class. I know you might want to say that making $100,000 or more per year is working class in a battleground state, but the battleground states are Rust Belt states, not New York City, not LA, where the cost of living is so high that might be working class. But those aren't the battleground states that Democrats would need to win if they want to get into the White House. They would need to be able to communicate and connect with people that are making over $100,000 that are black, that were thinking about voting for Trump, because from my experience of listening to them, they feel that Democrats don't know a fucking thing about their experiences and how it is that they had to get to that point. So when I see them interviewing working class black people, that's not who they actually need to connect with. They're not looking at, if Kamala Harris gets blown out because of black turnout in favor of Donald Trump, it's not going to be from working class black people. It's going to be exactly what it looks like. It's going to be that group. That's what would happen. And her answer was to look to Dick Cheney, who progressives called a war criminal for a long time. Dick Cheney, Lynn Cheney, who basically shouted down John McCain because she was all about torture and he wasn't. But yeah, I'm not voting this year, so good luck to you, because it seems like I read Kamala Harris's platform. It's It is 80 pages notionally. Um, there are 7 pages of notes that are included. The title page is included as a page. The table of contents is included as a page. Usually, those are you given Roman numerals and they're excluded from the page count. Um, so um, there are very strange decisions to include very large charts that have very low information and then just having them on a separate page with very large font to highlight the numbers as if either people can't read or they can't understand a, 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 a bar chart. There are 20 pages of those. There are a lot of there's a lot of empty space. There are almost, I think, 10 or 12 full page photographs in place of any substance. And what is there is unusually light compared to most platforms in the history of the two-party system, going all the way back to Lincoln versus McClellan in 1864. I just remember reading that. It was the oldest one that I read. So, yeah, this is actually the lightest policy platform um, in I think over 100 in the history of the current two-party system. Trump isn't any better, but in terms of just actual word count, they have surprisingly similar word counts because the very trimmed down Republican platform doesn't repeat itself nearly as much as the Kamala Harris platform. Given that I read both platforms and have already told you that I'm not planning on voting, that should let you know exactly where I stand. My income is, I'm just gonna, full disclosure here, not by much, but that is the case. Um, just barely. So her her policies are not going to benefit me. If I were less than, if you're making less than 50,000, or you're bringing in over 200,000, her policies are going to on net benefit you. Trump, on the other hand, it's going to benefit real asset holders. I'm talking people who have large numbers of rental properties. I'm talking if you've got an oil well, if you have a farm, if you need to control water rights. So if you're in a rural area and you want to control water rights, that is actually going to really get you to skew towards Republicans because they have historically staked quite a claim on that. Um, and if you're in a city, you kind of need to vote Democrat if you're going to vote at all, because in the next 20 years, water rights are going to be a seriously big thing. And if Republicans are in office and you're living in a city, you're just going to not have that much drinkable water. Okay, have a great one.